April 15th, 1978. A quiet evening in northern Italy. Two trains, packed with passengers, racing toward their destinations. But neither would arrive. A landslide in the darkness. A train derailed on the tracks. And then, just seconds later, disaster. Another train, speeding at over 62 miles per hour, with no way to stop. What happened next would become one of Italy's deadliest railway tragedies, leaving dozens dead and a nation in shock. Was it just bad luck? Or was this disaster something that could have been prevented? Stay with us as we uncover the chilling events of the Murazze di Vado train disaster. Before we dive into the background of this disaster documentary, I invite you to subscribe this channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our train disaster documentaries. Vado is a small town in northern Italy with a population of about 3,300 people as of 2023. It is part of the Monzuno municipality and lies 15 miles south of Bologna and 36 miles north of Florence. The town is surrounded by hills and forests with a quiet, rural atmosphere. Vado sits along the Bologna-Florence Railway, a 60-mile double-track electrified line that opened in 1934. It was built as the most direct connection between the two cities, cutting through mountainous terrain with long tunnels and bridges. This design allowed trains to travel at high speeds, making it one of Italy's busiest and most important railway corridors. The first train involved in the disaster was train number 572, was a passenger service running from Bari to Trieste, operated by the Italian National Railway FS. It consisted of two locomotives pulling several four-axle passenger cars. Its articulated design allowed for smoother movement, with the locomotive built in two connected halves. It rode on three two-axle bogies, with the center bogie able to pivot, similar to some city buses. This unique design helped it navigate tight curves and uneven tracks more efficiently. The second locomotive pulling train number 572 was the FS Class E 636.282, positioned directly behind the lead locomotive and ahead of the passenger cars. It shared the same body and wheel layout as the E645, featuring an articulated design with two connected halves mounted on three two-axle bogies. This design improved flexibility on curved tracks. The second train involved in the disaster was Rapid Train 813, known as Freccia della Laguna, Arrow of the Lagoon. It was an express service running from Bolzano to Rome, traveling in the opposite direction of train number 572. This train was made up of two FS Class AL601 units, towing a bistro car FSLE, 480 and a first-class seating car, FSLE 601. The AL601 was a two-car electric multiple unit introduced in 1961. It was designed for multi-traction use, allowing additional passenger cars to be attached. Special folding passageways at the ends of each unit let passengers move freely between connected cars. On April 15, 1978, a strong storm swept across Italy, with the worst conditions along the Adriatic coast. Heavy rain and strong winds pounded the area, creating dangerous waves that crashed onto land. The storm was so powerful that it damaged a bridge on the Adriatic rail line, which connects cities like Bari, Foggia, Pescara, Ancona, and Bologna. Since the bridge was badly damaged, the Italian National Railway, FS, had to either cancel or reroute many trains. One of these trains was train number 572, which could not take its usual route to Bologna. Instead, it had to travel on the Bologna-Florence main line. Train number 572, pulled by two electric locomotives, left Grisana while heavy rain continued to fall. Shortly after noon, the non-stop rainfall caused a small landslide. Rocks and soil slid onto the tracks right as the train was passing. The impact was so strong that it lifted the tracks, causing the train to derail. The front locomotive, E645016, dug into the gravel ballast, pulling the rest of the train with it. The train finally came to a stop, just a few feet away from plunging into a deep ravine running alongside the tracks. At this point, no major injuries had been reported, but the locomotive now stood diagonally, completely blocking both tracks, setting the stage for disaster. Seconds later, the Freccia della Laguna express train came racing out of a tunnel, heading straight for the wreckage of train number 572. The driver, likely still adjusting to the sudden change from darkness to daylight, had no time to react. At 68 miles per hour, the express train slammed into the derailed locomotive. The violent impact threw the EMU off the tracks, sending the leading cars flying off a bridge and into the ravine below. The first 4 cars of the express train were completely destroyed on impact, leaving almost no chance of survival for those inside. The towed passenger car was left dangling off the bridge, barely holding on. Only the bistro car remained on the tracks, still aligned but part of a scene of total devastation. The force of the crash tore apart E64 5.016, ripping its body and frame from its bogies. The locomotive was shoved backward into E636282, crushing its driver's cab and tearing its body off the frame. The passenger cars of train number 572 stayed mostly undamaged and on the tracks, but its 2 locomotives were completely destroyed. Amazingly, none of the passengers were hurt. However, both drivers of train number 572 lost their lives, as they had no time to escape before the crash. The express train suffered terrible damage. A total of 44 passengers were killed, along with both train drivers. Another 76 people were officially reported injured, though some sources suggest the number was as high as 117 to 120. Drivers on the nearby A1 motorway saw the crash happen right before their eyes. Even before the trains had fully stopped, calls to emergency services were already being made. Witnesses described a terrifying sight: train cars flying into the air as the impact sent debris everywhere. Some drivers didn't wait for help. They ran toward the wreckage, pulling survivors from the twisted metal and giving first aid until emergency teams arrived. The Murazze di Vado disaster became the first large-scale rescue operation managed by CEPAS, Center for Coordination of Rescue Operations. This organization had been created after a 1974 terrorist bombing targeted an express train, highlighting the need for better emergency coordination. Among the survivors of the disaster was Verona's soccer team, who had booked the express train at the last minute after their flight to Rome was canceled due to bad weather. Their original seats were in the leading car, which was completely destroyed in the crash. But by sheer luck, the team had just been called to the restaurant car at the rear of the train for lunch. They had barely reached it when the collision happened, a twist of fate that saved their lives. At first, police suspected a bombing, fearing a repeat of the 1974 train attack. But after talking to survivors and examining the wreckage, they realized the truth. This was not an act of terrorism. Many described the disaster as apocalyptic, but it wasn't caused by human error, negligence, or mechanical failure. Instead, nature was to blame, a rare mix of non-stop rain, unstable ground, and sheer bad luck. With 42 dead and over 76 injured, it became Italy's 4th deadliest train disaster, and the 3rd worst in peacetime, behind only the Balvano train disaster of 1944, which claimed a staggering 517 lives. But unlike other tragedies, there was no fixable cause, no one to put on trial. It was a disaster with no villains, only victims. By sheer chance, the storm had damaged a bridge on the coastal rail line, forcing train number 572 to take the Bologna-Florence route. There was no other option. Staying on its original path could have been even worse if the bridge had collapsed under its weight. Neither train was going too fast. No one made reckless choices or ignored warnings. They were simply traveling in opposite directions on a normal stretch of track, just like countless trains did every day. The Murazze di Vado train disaster was a heartbreaking event that didn't happen because of human mistakes, negligence, or bad intentions. Instead, it was caused by a series of unlucky events: a powerful storm, a landslide, a rerouted train, and a tunnel in exactly the wrong place at the wrong time. But what do you think? Could anything have been done to stop this disaster? Should railways invest more in weather protection and early warning systems? Or was this simply one of those tragedies that no one could have predicted? Share your thoughts in the comments below.